The wind swept low across the bone-dry earth, stirring dust into ghostly spirals along the cracked main street of Dead Mare Hollow. It was a place the map forgot, where windows stayed shuttered, men drank hard, and stories curdled into rumors like milk left too long in the sun. Boone Whitaker stood just outside the saloon, boot heel grinding against a knot of gravel, his long shadow stretching toward the auction block set up beside the sheriff's office. His coat was frayed at the cuffs, his hat stained from years of sweat and sun, and his face, half hidden in the brim's shadow, bore the stillness of a man long untouched by hope. He had not come for a girl. He had come for feed, salt, maybe a coil of wire for the north fence. But now he stood, jaw tight, as 3 girls were led off a wagon by a red-faced trader who smelled of mule sweat and cheap tobacco. All 3 bore the same faraway look, like their souls had fled their bodies weeks ago. One stopped him cold. She was no more than 20, though it was hard to tell through the dust on her cheeks and the bruises circling her wrists like faded ink. Her dress, made of silk once brilliant red, hung limp with wear, its sleeves torn, the hem stiff with mud. She moved without urgency, as if each step had to be negotiated with pain. Her name wasn't spoken. Her story wasn't offered. And when one man, rough-voiced and laughing, called out, "I'll give $5 for the China girl," Boone felt something in his chest twist. 10, he said. The air stilled. The crowd, mostly men hardened by land and whiskey, turned. No one outbid him. Not because of decency, but because $10 was too much for something they'd rather break than keep. The trader squinted. "You serious?" Boone nodded once. "Bring her." Leanne. That was her name, though Boone wouldn't learn it until 3 days later. She didn't speak as he led her to his horse, nor when he helped her mount, careful not to touch her more than necessary. Her eyes were dark, flat like glass over deep water, and she didn't look at him once during the ride home. The plains stretched wide and silent around them, the wind threading through the tall grass like a sigh. He didn't speak either. What could he say? That he didn't know why he'd done it? That he had no plan, no room for a girl, no right? His cabin was a day's ride from town, nestled in a quiet fold of hills near a dried-up creek. A lean-to barn, a chicken coop long abandoned by hens, a rope swing that no longer swung. Inside, there was bread gone stale, water gone warm, and a rifle propped by the door. Boone gave her food, poured her water, and left the door to the barn open. She slept there the first night, curled in the hay with her arms around her knees. The next morning, he found her at the edge of the property, staring out across the field like she was trying to measure the world. "You're not a prisoner," he said. His voice was rough with disuse. "You can leave when you want." She turned to him slowly. Her face was unreadable, but her hands trembled. She bowed slightly, then returned to the barn. He watched her go, heart heavy with something he couldn't name. By the 3rd day, she was tending the yard, pulling up weeds with her bare hands, dragging fallen branches into piles. Boone watched from the porch, the way one might watch a stray animal begin to make a nest nearby, quiet, cautious. He fixed the hinges on the barn door that week, mended her boots one evening while she slept, left fresh water by the basin every morning. Still, the whispers had already begun. Boone felt them the next time he went into town. The stares lingered longer, the conversations fell quiet as he passed. At the mercantile, the blacksmith spat on the porch as Boone stepped out. "Bought yourself a pretty piece, did ya?" someone muttered. Boone didn't answer. There were some insults not worth swinging at. He stayed away after that. They settled into a rhythm. He never asked her story. She never told it. But in silence they built something small and real. Leanne began to leave tea for him in the mornings. Once, she mended a rip in his shirt without a word. Another time, he found a bundle of wildflowers on the table, wrapped in twine. No note. Just color where there had been none. At night, they sat on the porch as the stars came out. The summer sky was so wide it hurt to look at. Boone would smoke his pipe, and Lien would hum tunes that drifted like wind through tall grass, songs he didn't know, in a language he couldn't understand, yet somehow made the land feel softer. Then came the wolves. One night, their cries echoed through the hills, sharp and ragged. Lien startled, her whole body flinching as if struck. Boone stood quietly, watching her. After a moment, she stepped closer to him, not touching, but near enough that their shadows mingled. Boone didn't move away. They stayed like that until the howling stopped. The next day, Boone found her standing at the old swing. She looked at it for a long time, then turned to him. "Your daughter?" she asked, her voice soft, hesitant. Boone nodded. She didn't ask more. He didn't offer. But that night, she brought out 2 bowls and waited for him to sit. The connection between them grew like spring beneath snow, slow, hidden, undeniable. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a beginning. A recognition. He gave her space. She filled it with quiet grace. And slowly they began to breathe in rhythm. One afternoon, Boone caught her reading an old book on his shelf, something about stars and stories. Her finger traced the lines slowly, lips moving soundlessly. She looked up, startled to see him. "You can read," he said. She nodded once. "My mother taught me. Before." He didn't ask before what. That evening, as the sky turned copper and the cicadas sang, she stepped onto the porch, a cup of tea in her hands. She offered it to him, and he took it. Her eyes searched his face. "You paid $10, she said, voice thin but steady. "But you never touched me. You let me be free." He looked at her, startled by the suddenness of the moment, by the weight behind her words. Then she asked simply, "Why?" Boone didn't know. Not really. He could have said guilt. He could have said instinct. He could have said the way she reminded him of what had been taken. But instead, he just answered, "Because you deserved more than what they gave." Lien studied him, then gave a small nod, almost a bow. That night, she didn't sleep in the barn. She sat beside him instead, on the porch, under the sky, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. And though no words were spoken, Boone understood. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. And maybe not ever. The days unfolded like old paper, creased, sun-bleached, quietly delicate. Lien had made a place for herself in Boone's quiet world, but neither of them had spoken the word belong. They moved through each day in a rhythm learned through silence. Boone still rose early to check the fence lines. Lien still swept the porch before the dew had lifted. Her garden had begun to bloom in cautious greens. Onions, turnips, wild herbs she coaxed from the dirt like secrets whispered into the earth. But not even the far edge of the frontier could stay untouched by the outside world forever. It was a Tuesday when the sheriff rode up, a dust trail following him like bad news. Boone was chopping wood near the corral when he saw the familiar gray hat and oilskin duster. Sheriff Clay Harrow wasn't a cruel man, but he was tied to the law like a horse to its post. He dismounted slow, as if unsure what side he stood on. "There are skin questions in town," he said, brushing dust from his gloves. "About the girl. About Lien." Boone straightened, axe held still in his hands. "Someone wired the railroad office. Says she matches description of a laborer went missing from their West Line crew. Claims she was under contract." Harrow's eyes flicked to the cabin. "Man's comin' through tomorrow. Says he's got papers." Boone's grip tightened. "She ain't a contract. She ain't anything to them." "I know that," Harrow said quietly. "But the law don't care about what's true. Just what's signed." When Harrow rode off, Boone stood a long while in the failing light, his shadow stretching long and still. That night, Lien found him sitting by the cold fireplace, his hands resting on his knees. "They'll come for me," she said softly. Boone looked up. Her voice had no fear in it, only understanding. "I won't let them take you," he said, and his words felt heavier than the walls around them. "You're free. That means they don't get to write your ending." She looked at him a long time. "Maybe," she said. "But even free things get hunted." That night, Lien packed a small bag. A shawl. A book. A single silver hair comb that had somehow survived every cruel mile behind her. She placed it gently in her satchel like a prayer. Boone found her standing by the barn the next morning, the early light brushing her face with gold. "I should go before they make trouble for you," she said. "I don't care what they do to me," Boone answered. She shook her head. "You saved me once. Don't lose everything just to do it again." He stepped closer, something fierce rising in his chest. "If you go now, it'll be their choice. Not yours." She blinked slowly, lips parting just enough to breathe in. Then, the sound of hooves on hard earth. A wagon. A man's voice, sharp and practiced. Boone turned. The railroad man was younger than he expected. Slick hair, pale suit, teeth white as bone. He carried papers in a leather case and a revolver holstered like decoration. Behind him stood two deputies Boone didn't recognize, men with the look of hired steel. "Name's Garvey," the man said, stepping down. "Here on behalf of Western Rail. That girl was contracted to us 6 months ago. Vanished. Stolen, some say. And by law." "She's not yours," Boone cut in. The man offered a smile as brittle as dry wood. "I've got documentation here says otherwise. Signed by her guardian back east. Legal purchase. You're harboring stolen property." Boone didn't move. "She's a person. Not property." "She's a breach of contract," Garvey said. "Now, you hand her over or I take it to the circuit judge. Maybe come back with a real posse next time." Behind Boone, Lien stepped forward. She did not flinch, though her hands were clenched tight around her shawl. Garvey raised a brow. "You speak English, girl?" She nodded once. "Then come along." She didn't move. She looked only at Boone. He didn't look away. "Do you want to go with him?" "No," she said. One word. Soft as breath. Final as thunder. "Then you're not going," Boone said. Garvey's smile vanished. "You gonna pull a gun over this, Whitaker?" "No," Boone said, stepping closer, eyes steady. "I'm gonna make you walk away." Something shifted in the air. The two deputies adjusted their stances. Garvey looked at them, then back at Boone. There was a silence where something dangerous lived. Then a voice called from the edge of the property. "She's got every right to stay." It was Sheriff Harrow, arriving with 4 townsfolk behind him, men who had once spat Boone's name like a curse. Now they stood with arms folded, unarmed, but unyielding. A quiet wall. Garvey's face twisted. "You backing this, Sheriff?" "I'm backing the Constitution," Harrow said. "You try and take her by force, I'll arrest you." The tension broke like a splintering board. Garvey cursed, kicked the wagon wheel, then climbed back up. "This isn't over," he spat. "It is for you," Boone said, not bothering to watch him leave. The wagon rolled away, and the dust behind it curled like smoke. Later, when the wind settled and the voices faded, Lien stood beside Boone on the porch once more. Her shoulders slumped, not from fear, but release. The world had pressed against her again, and still she remained. The stars blinked above them, far away and ancient. Boone lit his pipe but didn't smoke. He simply turned to her. "You could go now. If you want. I'd understand." She met his eyes, something soft and sure in her gaze. "Can I stay?" The air between them stilled. "Can I stay," she repeated, "as your wife?" Boone did not speak right away. Words were fragile things, and some moments too holy to rush. He looked at her, not as someone rescued, but as someone who had chosen. Not as a debt, but a companion. Not a ghost from his past, but the shape of his future. "If it's what you want," he said. She nodded. "I want to grow what roots me. I want to be somewhere I'm seen." He reached for her hand. No kiss. No claim. Just a quiet joining. A week later, they planted a sycamore tree in the field behind the barn. A tree that would outlast them. A tree that would someday shade the earth where two people once decided that freedom was not the end of a story, but the beginning of another. And in the quiet hours, when no one watched, Boone would trace the lines of her face with his eyes, and feel something bloom inside him, slow and steady, like spring rising through frost. Somewhere, far beyond the hills, the world kept moving fast and cruel. But here, in this forgotten corner of the West, grace had taken root.